My name is Eddie Jackson. I'm a music producer and engineer here in Los Angeles. Mostly I work here now. I used to travel, within the United States, but I'm mainly just working here now. And we're actually in probably my favorite studio here in LA, called East West Studios. Mainly a recording facility, I would say. Some mixing. I've never mixed here actually, but I have done a fair bit of recording in this studio. And I find that the rooms are, impeccably designed for recording, especially this room and Studio 2 down the hall. For a big open space, great sounding drum rooms. You can record anything in these studios. Both having, my favorite sounding recording consoles, these old vintage Neve boards that are great for, basically anything. And I come from a world where, I grew up learning on these kinds of boards. I used to work at a studio in New York as an assistant called Avatar, which, is similar formatted, I would say, a little bit different, not so clean and pristine on the lounge side of things, but the rooms, you walk into the rooms and it's just like being back when they were built, which really feels like home to me, So I tend to favor using the old approach of lots and lots of analog equipment. Great sounding microphones with great instruments in a great room makes my job really easy, That being said, it's not every day I can work in a big room like this, so I have adapted to working in the box, as they say, in Pro Tools, where I use lots of plugins, and that I've developed a very quick way of working that way, where it's like I can just put a million things on in this Pro Tools and move really quickly that way, which is very important, I find, these days. People want to move quickly and be able to recall mixes real fast within a computer, and yesterday, and they'll call me and say, hey, can we change this one thing? We need it done immediately, which I find the digital recording very helpful in that sense, and digital mixing and Pro Tools. I prefer mixing, on a large format board and in some sort of hybrid situation where I'm using analog and digital. I would say that's probably what I do the most of. I find that I have more dynamic stuff, more compression.
Oh, yeah. So
yeah,
like
that's
LA2A or...
Yeah, I have a couple 1176s like those, and distressors I have. A GML EQ, which I can't live without. An SSL bus compressor. Some of the old DBX 160s. That's about it as far as my personal collection. I've partnered with a friend of mine, a client of mine, and we're actually in the middle of, putting a big SSL in a studio, and which will then come with more stuff. But for now, that's what we have. And he actually has a lot of the same stuff. So we're probably going to sell off a lot of his to buy more fun stuff, like an LA2A or 2. And I'm a big fan of the Chandler TG, compressor. Chandler stuff in general is great. I have a TG channel, like preamp, that I love. Yeah, that's about it. And that list of gear was more for my older studio, where I was mixing with a Pro Tools HD in the box, but with a dangerous summing mixer, and I would have the GML and the SSL on the mix bus with inserts of other analog stuff. but I never really got into, aside from the GML and that TG channel, I haven't really felt the need to buy a ton of EQ. I tend to get more of my flavors from the analog with compression. That's just my style.
Oh yeah, it's your style.
Yeah. So I rely pretty heavily on plug-in EQ when I'm mixing in the box. I am, however, excited to get back into the world of mixing on a full analog desk with, you know, EQ on every channel. So, because that's what I like. I would still say there's a fair bit of, you know, pop recording artists and rock bands here. People still come here.
People still come.
Whether they live here or not, I mean, it's still a main place. I don't know why I'm saying like it's used to be more or less. I don't really know whether it's. I mean, they always talk about the heyday of LA being the 80s and the 90s, but you know, music has changed so much that I feel like maybe LA is not like a main place where bands get their grassroots followings as far as touring and everything, but it's a place that they work and they, you know, a lot of recordings are made here, a ton of writing and, you know, recording artists. But then bands, like I work with a ton of bands, and they, you know, one of them in particular lives here, they write here, they record here, and then they just disappear for, you know, 300 days on tour. So it's like they reside here, but, you know, you have to go play the world, you know. So, but, you know, a lot starts here. I do a lot of rock stuff, I would say. Rock and pop.
Rock and pop.
Yeah. Some singer-songwriters, you know, things like that. And
could I have it in a couple of clients' name?
right now I'm working with a band called Stars in Stereo.
Stars in the Studio?
Yeah, which Candace and East West is very familiar with. We're back in the studio making their second album right now, actually. A couple years back I worked with Gavin DeGraw, a pop singer named Monika. She's younger, doing really well. She's touring the world. So, a couple years before that, I worked as one of the engineers with James Taylor. I wasn't the main guy. I was younger at the time, but I worked in the you know, the world of engineering with him, with another guy named Dave O'Donnell, who was producing and engineering with me. So between the two of us, we did that. The combination of the sound of the room and the console with, you know, great sounding microphones, it's kind of hard to beat that. You know, it's just complete class. Yeah, I mean, especially when you get into recording acoustic instruments, you know, the space becomes really important. You know, one could argue that you could put a vocal microphone in a dead acoustic space and get a good, you know, vocal recording, but when you get a string orchestra in here, or, you know, want to record a big sounding rock drum kit, or a, you know, super pristine piano sound or something, it's kind of hard to do that without a great space and a great, so, and their microphone collection is nothing to sneeze at, so that helps for sure. Yeah, really good. I mean, can't beat it.
Great staff.
Oh yes, and great staff, that's for sure.
Yes.
And a fun hang too, you know. There's other studios in LA where you walk in and it's really kind of stale, and you know, they're good recording spaces too, but it's more fun here.
Oh yeah.
It's just absolutely more fun, and you know, they went way out of their way to design the lounge areas and everything to be, you know, updated, and I mean, it's beautiful. You should take a look outside. It's pretty awesome out there.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you can be relaxed.
Yeah, but I always joke about it. It's funny because this building has been here a long time, so you know, when you walk through the front door, you walk in, you go, whoa, this is so chic, you know, and then you walk into the studios, and as an engineer and a musician, you kind of go, oh, okay, good. It's still the old way,
Oh,
where you walk into the, when was this building built? 70s or 80s?
50s.
50s. I was way off, but you know, the studios have remained the same, and they're just, you know, the old style, but obviously, you know, still doing the job as good as you can. So, you know, just have the luxury of being in a great place like this. But it would be foolish of me to not acknowledge that that's where, you know, a fair bit of the music industry has gone, you know. So I do that sometimes myself too, you know. It's sort of avoidable, you know, and I have found that some of the, you know, people that have been working in the music industry in like the biggest heyday, like in the 80s and the 90s, when it was super lavish, in my opinion, because I'm of the newer generation where I never really had that. Sometimes they're a bit stubborn about how it used to be done, and they're not adapting to the new ways of the music industry and, you know, the recording side of things, and they're really missing out, and they're not, you know, they're struggling to find their way in the way it's done now, which, like you're saying, some of it is done with a computer in, you know, a bedroom, spare bedroom in someone's apartment, you know, one track at a time, you know. But if you could do one track at a time and you have a decent chain of a microphone and a compressor or EQ and a good converter, decent sounding converter, you can make some, you know.
And you're talented.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, you have to know what you're doing. But, you know, some people are amazingly good at that, you know, and that's hard to deny that, you know. And then maybe they'll take whatever they do have from a budget and spread it out on a console last minute and mix it that way, and that's the one thing that is still being done the most, I would say. Not, well, I don't know. Maybe that's not even true. Maybe it's just straight through to the end, mixed in the box and shipped out, you know. I tend to think that those types of recordings fail sonically, but there's also the argument that that's the style of production and that's what's cool, you know, about it. So there's no real right or wrong way, I guess. But a lot of it is just dealing with the fact that people don't have the luxury to be in a beautiful place, an amazing sounding room like this every day. You know, I think pretty much anybody would want to be in this studio every day if they could. You know, why not work here? You know.